All right, guys, welcome back to Crossman Productions. Man, guys, it has been a week, a crazy week. Man, I've just gotten off of working three 16-hour shifts, double shifts. So my whole schedule has just been so just screwed up this week. But I still wanted to jump on here because I miss you guys. It's been like a week since we talked and got to hang out. And I'm really excited about my next guest. Bringing him in. So, uh, man, luckily today is my Friday, so I get through the night. The whole I got to work overnight tonight, but once I get through that, I'll be able to sleep tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, man, I'm Steve brings me some of the most awesome people. To get to be able to sit down and talk to. Um, you know, we've had all kinds of people. We had Brian Elliott. We've had Shug Jackson. Which, if you guys go back and look, Shug Jackson's interview is doing crazy. The amount of views he's getting. Great guy too, man. We're working on a separate project, so I'll be making an announcement about that later. But we have such an amazing, uh, you know, list of guests that she's brought in, which includes my next guest. Um, and his name's Charlie Weirauch. Make sure I don't butcher that. But yeah, I'm bringing Charlie in, and we're gonna get to know a little bit about Charlie and what Charlie does, and talk to him a little bit about his journey. How's it going,
Hey,
Charlie?
hey, Cross, how are you, man?
I am doing awesome, man. Man, like I said, this week has just been so crazy. Like, one of the perks of my week is going to do shows like this to sit down and talk to new people, and getting to hear about their journey and uh, get inspired. That's what I love about sitting down with you guys and talking to you guys. So let me start it this way. Why don't you go ahead and kind of tell our audience like where you were born and raised, and what was life like for Charlie growing up?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on your show, Cross. It's a real privilege, and I was looking forward to this. You've had some really great guests on, and I've enjoyed watching a number of your interviews. So, a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, so that is my hometown, and I grew up there. Child interested in radio and music,
Oh, okay.
and so um, that kinda just, launched my career. I was the kid who, at nighttime would be underneath the covers listening to the radio stations around the country. You flip around the and it
Right,
with transistor radio now.
right,
Um,
right.
you'd flip around the dial, and you'd pick up stations all over the place. In Maryland, you could pick up those high-powered AMs in Chicago, WLS, and, up in, Boston, um WRKO, WTOP down in Washington, DC. So, I was playing around the dial,
Right.
listening to all these people, and, that's kinda where it started for me, my interest in radio.
Cool. Did you become a DJ or
Yeah, I wanted to be a DJ, and I thought I was gonna be that boss jock,
right?
but that didn't come about. There was another path that, I took in the roadway, which led me down, to a place where I never really thought I would go, and,
Right.
it turned out to be really amazing.
Cool. So you're doing you're a voice actor,
Yes, I am a voice actor. I started my voiceover business in 2019, just before COVID,
right?
but, I had that radio background, so I've been in radio for coming up in January, 40 years,
Okay.
and,
So
it yeah, I was in, I started off after I got out of a broadcasting trade school, because
right,
I was like, "I know what I wanna do. I don't wanna go through 4 years of taking the same courses that I took over just, to rehash stuff. I just wanted to get right to it."
right,
And I went to this little, Broadcasting Institute of Maryland trade school, and, they had a lot of instructors who were actually on the air on radio and on TV,
Right.
and I learned a heck of a lot, from them, and, I got out right away, and as soon as I graduated, I'm here, 19 years old, and, I landed a, job at a, 250 watt, radio station up near my hometown of Bel Air, Maryland.
Wow.
And, I started out, doing, like, sports and business reports during the weekdays, and then I had a, show that I hosted on Sunday, and part of that show was to bring up, a church service from, Oak Grove Baptist Church.
Okay.
And so, I had to get everything ready to for that live broadcast and get it all set up and, make sure that it aired properly, but,
Yeah.
that's kinda where I cut my teeth,
Yeah.
on radio, and then, you're always looking for the next best thing.
Right. So from there, where did you go in radio?
From there, I had somebody, who I was working with who'd mentioned that, there was an opening at at the time, it was called Metro Traffic.
Okay.
It was it was a small traffic reporting company that started out of Baltimore by, a gentleman by the name of David Saperstein,
Right.
and, he worked at an auto dealership called Action Ford,
Okay.
and he actually started the business right out of the car dealership. He had, like, a little corner place,
Wow.
um, where they, I think, eventually began their broadcasts,
Okay.
and so I heard about this job, and, the person told me that they were looking for an airborne/mobile slash mobile traffic reporter, and I was like, "Oof," I'd never flown before, and
Yeah.
I never really, I think, had an interest in flying, but it seemed like a fantastic opportunity because it gave you the ability to not be on just one station, you could be
Yeah.
on a host of stations.
Right.
And so, one thing led to another. I find myself interviewing with the manager of Metro Traffic, and this guy was a guy that I used to listen to, like, in the back of my parents' car, traveling around and hearing him do the traffic reports, and I'm sitting there in
Right.
front of being
Wow.
interviewed, and that kinda blew me away. Uh, Eventually got the job, and then I was up in the air for about 7 years.
Wow. So let me ask you this, because I mean, you're up in the air for quite a while during the day. But how many hours are you up there for?
Yeah, I was working a split shift, so I would be up there in the morning. I had to be wheels up in the air at 5 AM,
Wow.
and then we'd probably fly, sometimes we'd fly to 8:30, sometimes we'd fly to 9 o'clock. So I'd be up there for 4 hours most of the time in the morning,
Right.
and then, I'd come down and, maybe get some rest and then come back for the afternoon drive. Have
Yeah.
to be up, 3 PM, and we're probably flying to about 6:30.
Wow. So what was the first time you went up there? What was that like for you?
Oh, great question. Yeah, uh, the first couple of weeks were pretty rough for me.
Right.
Um, we were flying in a Cessna 172, a four-seater.
Right.
So, there was the pilot, and I was flying with another, traffic anchor who was sitting in the other seat, and I was in the back seat. And I just remember probably for the next 2 weeks, each time that I got down from the ground, I just, like, lay in the back seat of my car, and I was just like, "Ugh, I don't feel good."
Right.
And, it after a while, you kind of, you develop this steel stomach for flying,
Right.
especially when you fly in smaller aircraft, because you feel so much when you're up there. I
Right.
mean, the slightest wind and, either the plane is bouncing all over the place. Um, Helicopter's not quite as bad, but some of the smaller aircraft, you feel it all.
Wow. And then you're up there because it's not just you. There's other traffic controller reporters up there. So you got all this, other people. What was that like? I mean, you seeing? Did you have any close calls
Uh,
with any of the other pilots up there?
we didn't have close calls with pilots. I remember one time, when you're an anchor flying with a pilot, um, you're also an additional set of eyes. So,
Yeah.
when the tower is calling out traffic at certain altitudes and you're up there, it's a bright sunny day, sometimes it can be hard to spot them.
Right.
And so, you're constantly scanning around. I remember one time, we were coming in on an approach to Martin State Airport, which was, northeast of Baltimore. It was like the afternoon.
Right.
We were coming down, and all I remember is seeing this big shadow, kind of go over top of us,
Wow.
our aircraft,
Right.
and it must have been up probably a couple of 100 feet, but it was one of those, I think it was like a C-130 or something,
Mm.
just some big aircraft, and we were
Mm.
like, "Oh my god, that just came out of nowhere."
Wow.
So that was one of the close calls that I had, and I had another incident that, I didn't think I was gonna make it out of.
Wow.
Um, but, you were asking about, being up there with other reporters. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Um, Knowing that and that, we're all racing to cover these accidents and to be the first on the air,
Right.
we kinda developed a plan where we would fly at different altitudes.
Mm.
I may be up at 1,800 feet, someone else may be down at, like, 1,200 feet,
Right.
so we always flew in a staggered, pattern,
Right.
and whenever we would get to an accident scene, all of us would want to circle so that, when the time came you were going live on a broadcast,
Right.
they tilt the plane down and circle this thing, and we're reporting exactly on what we're seeing at the time.
Right.
But, we always made sure that we were safe. The pilots would, move to a certain frequency. They would talk with each other and, coordinate.
Right.
So that was always top of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm afraid of heights, so that was already I'd already been gone with that. But 'cause I can't imagine being that high up and then still trying to have your bearings to be able to watch and report something's going on. Could you?
Yeah, I was even flying at times, at about 2,500 feet,
Right.
and, when you look down, everything looks much, much smaller. The cars just look really small.
Right.
Um, but it's a unique vantage point. It you know, when you're up there, you get to see the sunrise and you get to see the sunset,
Yeah.
from that vantage point, and it gives you kind of a feeling like, almost godlike.
Right.
You're looking down on everything that's going on below you, and you feel like you're the only person above everything else.
Yeah. Man. So how long did you do that for?
Uh, I was up there, just shy of 7 years,
Wow.
and then I came back down and I was doing, radio, TV traffic reports in a studio.
Okay.
But I had flown in just about every aircraft you can think of. I was in small, two-seater 152s, 152 XP, which were they call it kind of the acrobatic, small Cessna, only
Right.
because, um, if you lost power in your automated flaps, they had actually a handheld a lever at the top above your head where you can pull that lever in and draw the flaps.
Wow.
So, yeah, I flew in those. I flew in 172s, 172 XPs, Tomahawk. I actually flew in a Cherokee one time, wings
Wow.
below the
Yeah.
fuselage. That was
Yeah.
kinda weird, but, they had no other spare backup aircraft to give us, and so I was actually in a Cherokee, multi-seater, prop, reporting traffic, from
Wow.
that vantage point.
The Cherokees are pretty big too, aren't they? They're
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a fairly big aircraft.
Right.
Um, Dual engine aircraft I flew in. I flew in helicopters as small as, R-44s,
Right.
Bell Jet Rangers, turbo
Right.
turboprops.
Right.
So it was a pretty cool job.
Yeah. Man. So did you ever learn to fly? Like fly the plane yourself?
Yeah, I did. One of the ththings, it was interesting, the pilots that I had, flown with, they were very talented,
Mm.
very good at what they do, and, from a safety aspect, they wanted me to know, how to fly just in the event that something, in case something happened to them, I
Right.
would know how to, land that aircraft.
Right.
And so, many a times, they taught me everything. They taught me how to take off, how to land, um, how to fly that thing, and, man, I had a blast.
Wow. So did you end up getting like a pilot's license, or like try
I
to get
never did, I look back, um, because you have to have a certain amount of, flight time accumulated before you can qualify for your pilot's license,
right,
and, taking into account I was up there, 6.5, 7 hours a day,
right,
you multiply that over a year, I had well over the hours to
right,
qualify, for my pilot's license, so now I could kinda kick myself that I didn't do it,
right,
but I was also young at the time, and I was making, chump change.
right, right, man. So so then you went from being a pilot into doing voice acting. When did you kind of make that transition, and what kind of drew you to changing career paths like that?
Great question. I'm still in radio, so,
Okay.
that is my full-time job, only I moved into the management side of things
Right.
31 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and so, when I started with Metro Traffic, um, over the period of now almost 40 years, I've
Right.
gone through working with 3 different companies, 2 sales consolidations, and, in '93, that's when I made the transition from being talent to manager.
Right.
And, so how did I get into the voiceover work? Um, I always wanted to do, commercial work. I always wanted to do network promo work.
Right.
And so back in the '90s, I started dabbling into that stuff.
Mm.
Um, I actually started, doing, narrating industrial films for the US Army,
Okay.
and, I found myself, at one time narrating, how to put together and take apart the M1A1 Abrams tank,
Wow.
and so this was not too long after that tank came out,
Right.
and I'm seeing all these detailed instructions
Wow.
on, how to do this, how to do that, take this screw here, tighten this, torque that,
Right.
and, one thing I learned from narrating industrial films for the Army is they're very particular about everything.
Right.
Um, every pronunciation has to be on the mark. So, a 1-hour film, narrated film can turn into like a 3 to 4-hour session.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, and that was pretty interesting. So, I started out doing that. I did a commercial, and then I had to shelve it because I started progressing the ladder in management and,
Mm.
got married,
Right.
and, so I didn't have much time to dedicate to it, because I
Right.
was wrapped up with my full-time work, so I shelved it, and there wasn't a day that I didn't think about it
Right.
and just saying, "Man, I wish I was doing this. I know I can do this. I should be doing this."
Right.
And so what led me to it? A lot of people in radio say, they get, people commenting about their voice. "Hey, you got a great voice, you should be doing this, you should be doing that," and all of us in the business kinda
Right.
smirk at that, It's like, "Okay, yeah, um, great voice." We
Mm.
all hear it at one time or another, and there was one point where it started picking up for me, where I was
Right.
getting a lot of those comments, and people were leaving messages on my, uh, my phone at work because they would hear my voicemail message,
Right.
and one afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting in my living room, and, there's some magazines on the coffee table,
Mm.
and one caught my eye. It, it was a monthly magazine for Bloomsburg University, where my daughter went to college,
Okay.
and on the front of the cover was a picture of this gentleman who had headsets on, and he was talking into a microphone, so that grabbed my attention, and
Right.
I started reading the story, and the story was about how this guy went to, Bloomsburg and turned out to be a big voiceover artist,
Oh wow.
and I was like, "Wow, that's an interesting story."
Yeah.
Um, no more than 30 minutes after that, my phone rings, and I had, my RV in the shop for some service,
Mm.
and I was expecting a call from them.
Right.
And, the phone rings, I pick it up, and he says, "Hey, this is such and such, your RV is ready." And then
Yeah.
he proceeds to ask me, he goes, "Are you in radio?" I said, "Yeah, why you ask?" He goes, "I thought you were in radio. I heard the message that you left on um, the voicemail."
Right.
And then the next thing he said to me just sent, like, chills up my spine. He goes, "You should be doing voiceovers."
Wow.
And here's a guy who's not in the business, and he's using a term like that, and no more than 30 minutes before that, I read this article about this guy who made it big in voiceover.
Right.
And just knowing all the time that I've been thinking about this, wanting to do it, not moving on it, and soon as I heard that, I looked at my wife and said, "That's a sign. I gotta do this.
Right.
Something is moving me to do this."
So
And so I find myself, January 2019,
okay.
uh, I'm perusing social media, trying to get to know everyone that I can in the
Right.
voiceover business, and I catch this gentleman out in LA who's holding, he called it, an extensive, uh, voiceover weekend, and he was holding it in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh wow.
And I went to my wife and said, "I gotta go. I gotta go to this."
Right.
And next thing you know, I'm on a plane and I'm there at this workshop.
Mm.
And that's how it all kicked off for me.
Wow. So what ended up being your first job doing the voiceover after that?
Yeah, my first job, wow, it was a pretty big booking. It came 8 months after I started, getting my stuff together, getting my home studio, um, built. And it was for the 2020 presidential, election.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Cool.
I did a presidential spot, and I was totally blown away by that. I got a call by the production company and the guy said, "Hey," casting director said, "Hey, you're going right to the top. You
Oh
were the
wow.
top voice in this selection."
Wow. That's
So,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I knew from there, this is what I'm doing.
Right. And have you done voiceover for like any or have interest or doing any for like anime shows or anything like
Yeah, I as a matter of fact, I did play a lead character role in a video game that's out.
okay.
Um, do you remember the arcade game? It was back in the '90s. It was really popular. It was called House of the Dead.
House of the Dead. I think so. I'm thinking of something like not Resident Evil, the other one. Man, they made a movie out of it. But yeah,
Yeah, well, back then they had those cabinet games where you would sit in a seat, you'd have the screen in front of you,
right,
and, you'd have the light guns and so forth, and you'd play these games.
right.
Well, this particular game back then was considered gruesome.
Oh,
They had R ratings on everything, R ratings on music, R
right,
ratings on this and that,
right.
and they considered the game to be a little too gruesome, and so they put, like, curtains on this cabinet game, and so
Oh,
when people would go into the cabinet game, everybody's like, "Wow, what's going on behind there? Why they got curtains? Why is it covered up?"
right.
And so that's the game, and they brought it back, um, and they called it House of the Dead Remake,
Okay,
and so I play one of the 2 main antagonists, Agent G, or G for short.
okay. Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun too.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was crazy. I mean, you know, to have your voice on a video game, that
Right.
to me, that's pretty wild.
Right.
Um, I I remembered, auditioning for that game. It was probably the best audition that I had as far as enjoying it,
Right.
because they kind of gave me some creativity to do what I wanted to do. They gave me some direction,
Right.
but they let me go ahead and create. So I
Right.
really auditioned for as many of the characters as I could.
Okay.
And what was interesting was, um, one of the character voices that I did, um, they wanted to use it not for that character, but they wanted to use it for that main
Right.
antagonist in the game.
Right.
So, I thought back to myself, I'm like, "Man, if I didn't audition for each and every character, I may not have gotten that role."
Right.
So, it goes to show you if you're in this business, try to audition for as many, especially in animation, as many character roles as possible. You just never know
Right.
what's gonna hit.
Right. And right now, animation is so huge. With
Oh,
this generation. So I'm
absolutely.
watching One Piece with my daughter, the animated series. So that thing's gone on forever. The thing's got like a billion different episodes.
Right. Yeah,
So
but, yeah, video games have just exploded.
wow. So no, if somebody's watching this and they're wanting to get into like the air traffic, you're being an air traffic reporter, what what advice would you have for them to get into that field?
Wow, what advice would I have for them if they're trying to get into, airborne traffic reporting? Well, number 1, you gotta have, you gotta like to fly,
Right.
and not have a fear of flying, so if you can cross that one off, you're 50% of the way there. Um, I would say that, if you have some reporting experience,
Right.
that bodes well for you. You could, if you've had experience reporting news,
Right.
um, you could, qualify for one of those positions. And probably the best qualification is be a good storyteller.
Mm,
Um, if you can do that and you can talk off the cuff
right.
without having a script in front of you, be able to ad lib, then that plays right in your hands because you need the ability to do that if you're an airborne traffic reporter. I remember, when I first started, I'm like, "Oh my god, how am I going to put this all together? I'm flying, the aircraft's bumping, bouncing all over the place. I
Right.
can't write anything out."
Right.
So what I did and many other traffic reporters had done at the time, we were kinda creating our own symbols
Mm,
and I guess you could say hieroglyphics,
right.
um, shorthand for traffic reporting,
Mm,
and that's kind of what I went by. I'd have a kind of a legal pad in front of me at the time, and
right.
I would have all these abbreviations, symbols to help me run through that report.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you can do that, yeah, you can qualify to be an airborne traffic reporter. I can tell you it's fun, best job you can have.
Right.
Yeah, what I mean,
So,
what's there not to like? I mean, being up there, flying around, I had to pinch myself. I'm like, "Somebody's paying me to do this? You gotta be kidding me."
right.
But I was
So,
young though at the time, Cross. You know what?
right.
Looking back now and the things that had seen and
Right.
gone through, uh, I probably would not do it.
If you now you went, yeah.
Yeah, there was one time, uh, I had mentioned earlier that, during one flight, I didn't think I was gonna make it back.
Right.
We went up for an AM drive, uh, traffic shift,
Right.
and at the time, we were flying out of an airport east of Baltimore in the, Essex area. It
Mm,
was called, I think Eastern Sky Park at the time. This was a postage stamp. I mean, postage stamp runway. You
right.
had trees on at both ends of the runway,
Mm,
so you had to be pretty good to get
right.
in and out of that location. So we take off, and, there was some weather expected in the area coming from the west,
Mm.
and we thought, "Okay, maybe we can get in half of the shift,
Right.
and then, come back and we'll report from the ground."
Right.
Well, we get up and we go, towards Baltimore City. We're starting to fly up the JFX, and looking out west, we could see this definitive dark front coming
Wow.
our way.
Right.
And at the time, we're flying in a 152, and my pilot was an older gentleman. He was in his early 70s, and he was an instructor, so he was considered like a master pilot, master instructor. I think he
Right.
had that type of license. And he looks at me, and, while we're up there flying, and he says, "Look, uh, I don't think we can outrace this. We're gonna have to go into it." And I'm thinking to myself, "You gotta be kidding me." And, so we go into it,
Right.
and I gotta tell you, it it was the most frightening time I had in my life flying. The wings were just going back and forth,
Wow.
because of the wind,
Right.
and I could see his hand on, the yoke going like this as well.
Right.
He looks over at me, with this concerned face, and he said, "We've gotta try to get back. We can't stay in this." And right then and there, I'm, like, saying the Lord's Prayer to myself. I'm like, I'm not gonna make
Right.
it out of this."
Yeah.
And thank
Wow.
God, when he turned the aircraft around, we had a tailwind that pushed
Mm.
us
Right.
ahead, and we did make it back. But
Wow.
I can tell you, I pretty much kissed the ground after I got down from that flight.
Wow. It would take me a long time to get back up after that.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think when you're young,
Mm. Yeah.
you do anything, you're
Right.
crazy,
Right.
and, that's why I said knowing what I know now,
Right.
probably wouldn't do it.
Wow.
There was another incident that we had, this was when I was, managing the Baltimore office. We had 2 aircraft that were flying during a rush hour. AM drive, I have a new reporter that's training in one of the aircraft. It was just her and, the pilot. In the second aircraft, I had 2 anchors in there with the pilot, and they were both seasoned,
Right.
during their AM drive shift. And the person who was training was following the other aircraft around the Baltimore Beltway.
Mm.
All of a sudden, the aircraft with the 2 pilots in there developed engine trouble.
Mhm.
They had oil that just splattered up across their windshield, and then
Wow.
they became a glider.
Wow.
And during morning rush hour, as soon as the pilots are taught, as soon as the engine dies, you try to get as much lift as you can,
Mhm.
and then you immediately begin searching for a place to bring down the aircraft.
Right.
And here's, AM Drive. You got, people all over the Beltway, people all over the interstate. He finds a place northwest of Baltimore on I-795, and he decides that he's gonna bring it down with the flow of traffic on that
Wow.
interstate. And I remember him, talking about what it was like to bring that plane down and what he had witnessed. He said, "As I was bringing the plane down, up ahead, I noticed there was an overpass, and I realized at the time I had no lift to go over the overpass, so I have to go under it."
Wow.
And he said at the time, as he was coming down to make the landing on I-795, he passed this Baltimore Gas and Electric truck. He saw the faces on the guys as they
Right.
watched this plane go past them and
Right.
land in front of them on the interstate. Um,
Wow.
and luckily, they landed safely, pulled it off into the median, and thank God they both came out of that incident.
Wow. That's a timing issue too to get as you bring that plane down to go under an
Yeah,
overpass. That's crazy, man. That's
ph phenomenal,
yeah.
phenomenal. And, a lot of people considered the pilot at the time, a hot dog pilot because he would take chances.
Right.
gotta tell you, I think everyone was glad that he did take those chances.
Right. Wow. And that's, to me, that's like the grace of God to get in there, 'cause that's, that's very difficult to, to pull through. So, uh, without
Yeah,
hitting the overpass or hitting, you know,
cars, I mean, just cars in general. I mean, you
exactly.
have, yeah, you have no lift, you have no speed, you're just a glider.
Yeah.
But,
Wow.
that wasn't the only incident.
Yeah.
Flying, when you fly for a number of years, you're playing against the law of averages.
Right.
And so, you're bound to experience something,
Right.
when you fly in those smaller aircraft, whether it's a bad mag, which, in the engine, it causes the engine to burp,
Hmm.
and almost as if the engine's gonna quit, and
Right.
I've had that a couple of times, and both the pilot and I looked at our we would look at ourselves real quick. It's like,
Right.
"Is that gonna be an engine failure, or is that just something else?"
Right.
So, yeah,
Wow.
interesting job.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Now, if somebody's wanting to get into voice acting, um, you know, what's your advice for them? How to get into that and things that they should do to prepare for that?
Yeah, oh, and a lot of people are doing it right now. I think
Mm.
because, um, of the pandemic,
Right.
and, people working at home and finding, uh, new ways to bring in income. Um, and the fact that the technology has moved so far forward that we can do these things now at our home that we could only do if we went to a studio.
Right.
Um, there's a number of things that people should do before they get into the business. First and foremost, I like to tell a lot of people to basically do a lot of research.
Mm.
Go online, social media, follow people who are in the business,
Right.
get to know them. Um, they'll have to set up a home studio.
Mm.
They'll have to have the right equipment. Um, they'll have to determine the type of voice work that they want to get into.
Right.
Because, there's various different genres of voice work. You could be, like you mentioned earlier, in animation.
Right.
You can be an audiobook narrator.
Mm.
Um, you can do, e-lessons, from corporations. Um, you could do network promos. You could do TV, radio commercials. I
Right.
mean, it spans the gamut right now. And
Yeah.
so you really have to determine what your interest is, figure that out, and then start coaching with
Yeah.
qualified coaches. Um, there's a lot of scams out there right
Yeah.
now. There are a lot of people who, um, shouldn't be coaching,
Mm.
and, that's why I say you really have to do your homework and find out who's who in the business.
Right.
And so, once you do that, once you coach up really well,
Right.
and, you and also your coach feels like, "Okay, it's time to move forward to put together a demo."
Right.
Then you start, seeking out either coaches who also, um, record demos, or just engineers who do that type of work, engineers and producers.
Right. So,
And so so your
let me
demo
ask
is your
you,
calling card.
uh, if somebody's, because there's a lot of scammers out there. Um, how does somebody determine what's kind of some of the red flags of someone who's maybe a scammer coach, so they
Great
can
question.
kind of eliminate that part? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um,
Mm.
usually people that promise you the world,
Mm.
they get in there, they say, and they charge you an astronomical rate too.
Mm.
Charge you, couple $1,000 to $3,000, and they say, "Hey, I guarantee you that, you'll get work in, this type of business." Well, there's no
Right.
guarantee.
Right.
There's never a guarantee. And, so you gotta watch out for that, because they're out there.
Right.
And, like I said earlier, get to know who those good coaches are.
Mm.
If you join some Facebook groups,
Right.
um, for voiceover,
Right.
um, there's a lot of great information being shared online,
Yeah.
that will help you determine who's who in the business.
Right. Okay. Um, and then, because you've been doing this for a while, one of the things I was going to ask you is, what is the biggest lesson you've learned so far in this industry?
Hmm. Biggest lesson that I've learned, um, I would say for me is I did a lot of research, but I think I was too anxious to cut a demo
Right.
and try to get myself out there before I was really ready.
Right.
I wish I would have in the beginning um, secured more coaching in various genres of the work
Right.
before cutting that demo. Um, you know, not to say that the first couple of demos that I cut weren't good,
Right.
but when I look back at them, that some of them I don't think really quite met the standard
Right.
at the time. So that's what I wish I would have done differently when I look at the business.
Mm. Wow.
And a lot of people get into that situation where, you're eager, you wanna get out there,
Yeah.
you want to, secure some business,
Right.
uh, but, sometimes, things change in the voiceover world, and what was acceptable, 10, 15 years ago is not acceptable today.
Wow. So how much has that industry changed from 10 to 15? What's the biggest changes that you've seen?
Now, the biggest change is, I'm gonna say COVID. I mean,
Mm.
COVID had just a tremendous impact on the business. It really turned it upside down. It went
Mm.
from, most people prior to COVID were going to production, houses and studios to audition,
Right.
not just to go there to cut the piece of work, but just to audition.
Right.
And now, COVID has provided the opportunity for people in this business to do it right from their home.
Right.
Secure the microphone, secure the mic preamp, make sure that you have a laptop or a desktop, make sure that you have your lines of communication
Right.
that you would send down, your voice work and, your DAW, which, helps you record and process and edit that work.
Okay.
So I think that's the biggest shift in the
Right.
business, and um, I think it's allowed more opportunity
Right.
for people to get into the business. Now, you could set up at home, you can put your work online, you can market yourself on social media.
Right.
Somebody sees you, next thing you know, you're cutting a TV commercial.
Right. And that's one of the things that we talk about all the time is the technology that's come out of from COVID, allows us to do stuff like what we're doing now. You know, Before you'd have to go to the studio and sit down with somebody and talk to them. Now I can talk to people from all around the world. You know, do a live interview, and get the information out directly to people. And then I think too, it's also helped like the filmmakers. That's why we have so many new independent filmmakers out there. The technology's there now, and so that's one of the I think the positive things that's come from it.
I think so. It's given a lot of people opportunities that they would not have normally had,
Right.
prior to COVID. Because not everybody can, travel up to New York or travel out to LA or, you know, travel to Chicago, some of these big cities where these production houses are based.
Right.
So, where there's something bad, something good can come
Right.
out of it.
Wow.
And I don't see it going back. I just think it allows voices and, actors the ability to, um, and casting directors to find talent quickly
Yeah.
and get them to, to record.
And it gives, like you said, it gives people opportunities who aren't in the big, the big cities where a lot of these places are. So um, the other thing I was going to ask you is, so now, um, where are you going from? What plans do you have from here? Is there any special projects that you're working on?
Yeah, very good question. This one's deep in my heart. I've always wanted to do network promos,
Okay.
and that's the thing that I have been thinking about the most over the years.
Mm,
And I'm looking at moving in that direction right now.
right.
There are a couple of networks that I have my eye on that I would love to work for,
Right.
um, doing network promos. I'll put them out there because if you put them out there, and then you gotta live up to that
Right.
stuff that you put out in the world, right?
Right.
So, I would love to do network promos for either CBS or Fox.
Okay.
Um, and then, of course, some of the streaming networks that are out there. There's a lot of opportunity,
Mm,
um, that, is now in place because of the expansion of streaming networks.
right.
So, I've kind of, honed in on a couple of coaches
Okay.
that I would like to work with, and, I've talked to them already, and, I'm looking to probably work with one of the 2 that I've narrowed, my choice down to.
Right.
And then soon as I coach with them, I'm looking to put together a network promo and then start, looking for representation.
Okay. Cool. Speaking of that, if somebody's trying to get to follow your career or wanting to get to know more about you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you or to follow you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm all over social media, so, I'm on LinkedIn, and it's basically Charlie Weirauch, 3VO. You'll find
Okay.
me under, that name, also on Instagram, on Facebook, and then I do have a website,
Okay.
which is charlieweiroch3vo.com. And so the power of 3, um, everything happens in threes.
Wow. Well, cool. So what we'll do is we'll take that information and we'll post it in the comment section so people can, easily access your links.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would love to hear from people.
Cool. Well, I am so, thankful that we were able to get this, to make this happen and have you on the show. Um, you know, uh, I've really enjoyed, being able to talk to you and get to know your story. So, thank you so much for being on the show, man. Taking time out with us.
Thank you very much, Cross. I greatly appreciate it. It was great to get to know you here. I love what you're doing, and it's a real privilege to be on your podcast.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. So, yeah, definitely. So, as you have new projects come up, just let us know. We'll bring you back and we'll help promote, what you got going on. So,
Fantastic. Yeah, I look to share some good news with you soon.
awesome. Awesome. And we look forward to it too. So,
Thank you very much.
awesome. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. Tomorrow I have 2 more guests. We're going to have 2 back-to-back interviews tomorrow, which is going to be awesome. You don't want to miss those. Um, but until then, remember, guys, you guys are uniquely designed with a purpose, and always keep moving forward. Peace.